Hey everybody, it's been a really long time since I've been able to just sit down and have a chat with you. I've had so many different ideas that I've wanted to share with you, so many different conversations that have sparked my mind and my thoughts, and I just haven't had the chance to be able to sit down and chat, and I'm just really excited that I get to do that today. I'm hoping that I'll have a chance to edit this video and get it out to you soon. So if you're seeing this, I managed it. Well done, Jonty. So yeah, recently I had the privilege of meeting someone who was really nice. There was a colleague of mine who has recently moved back to Singapore from New Zealand, having been away for about 20 years. And it was a really interesting chat. As you can probably imagine, those of you who followed my journey over the last few years, you probably would guess that I would be very excited about meeting someone in this situation. Similar situation to me, having been away from Singapore for 34 years, only returning like 5 years ago. And so, yeah, it was really cool to be able to chat to her and to be able to find out her perspectives of coming back home to Singapore. And there was one thing she said that really stood out to me, which was this: I can't stand Singaporean people because they're really, really rude. And it caught me a little bit because for me, I've felt very, very welcomed, and I felt very happy to be back, and I feel like most Singaporeans kind of feel the same way too. And so I asked her a few more questions. I asked her some follow-up questions to see what her thinking was around it, and it was really fascinating to hear what she said. She talked specifically about how the pleases and the thank yous and the general etiquette in conversation seems to have disappeared out of the Singapore language. And she said specifically marketplaces, hawker centres, people on public transport didn't often say please or thank you. She might hold doors for people and receive absolutely no eye contact or anything like that. And it got me thinking about a few different things that I wanted to share with you, and I wanted to ask your opinion of, because I really, really love it when you send me messages and comments about the topics that I'm talking about. It helps me with my processing of what I'm thinking about, and it also helps me with understanding more about my country of birth, this beautiful country of Singapore. So one of the things that came to mind was this. So back in 2014, it was our first ever trip as a family to Singapore. It was Millie's first ever trip to Singapore. Milo was only 1 year old. We noticed quite a lot that people would rush onto the lifts before we would. We'd have a baby in the pushchair, and people would push in front of us, and being British, we would kind of stand back and just let people move in front of us. And then we found out that we were just kind of waiting a really, really long time because people would push in, and it was kind of frustrating, to be honest. And then fast forward to us moving here in 2020, where we realised that people aren't like that anymore. People in Singapore have kind of figured out that it's rude, and people aren't like that anymore. People seem to be a lot more understanding to those who need the lifts. People are more willing to stand back and let others go in front of them. And I realised that so much of this is from the education that I can't remember what their names are. I always call them the Karens and get told off. The something bunch? The considerate crew? I'm not really sure their names. But they are the Bag Down Benny and the Stand Up Susan and all the different characters that are promoted through our public transport system. And this is a wonderful positive thing that I've really enjoyed, and we've seen the benefits of. But there was one in particular that I don't know if you remember, but she was around for just a short little while. She was around during the COVID times, and her name was Hush Hush Hannah. Now the idea of Hush Hush Hannah was that over the COVID period, by talking on the MRT or talking on the bus, our droplets, our moisture would come out of our mask, and we could spread COVID-19 even further than before. And so everyone was encouraged not to say anything. And now I've realised that I think what has happened is that since 2020, during the whole COVID-19 pandemic, 2021 after that, this whole culture of Hush Hush Hannah has still kind of played its way out, because people are afraid to have conversations. Back then, we were afraid to have accidental conversations with people we didn't know, in case we were caught and, Hush Hush Hannah, we weren't being polite, and we were being inconsiderate to one another by talking by accident. Now, I remember soon after masks came off in public and on public transport, there was one situation where it was a really, really busy day, and a lady had got on and she'd stood next to me, and she kind of wobbled and fell into me. I kind of like had to support her and make sure that she got back up again. And she apologised, "I'm so sorry, it's just so busy since the mask has come off." And I turned to her and I said, "Yeah, but we're having conversation now." And she looked back at me and said, "Yeah, you're right, that's really nice." And I just thought, yeah, we've missed out on this for such a long time, that it was a really, really lovely thing that we're able to have conversation again. And I wonder whether our dependence on our phones, Singaporeans love looking at their phones all the time, and our fear from the COVID-19 days of striking up an unwelcome conversation has meant that we can seem to be a little bit frosty. Now, I know there have been some very public influencers on social media who've come to Singapore and talked about how rude our people are, and I just don't see it, to be honest. I kind of could understand, but I don't think our people and our nation as a whole is a rude nation. Take, for example, the Pope. He was recently here and he talked about how beautiful the multicultural society of Singapore is. I was lucky enough to be at the Coldplay concert. Chris Martin talked about how beautiful it was to see Singapore in action, with different cultures and different religions standing side by side and being embracing of one another. And I see that as something that is quintessentially Singaporean, something that is uniquely us as well. And so to be able to have someone talk about how rude we can seem, and someone who is Singaporean at heart, or at least was Singaporean for a long period of time, it just made me think. And I've come to a conclusion, and I wonder if you'd agree with me. It is this. Now, let me contextualize it a little bit. I know that Singapore has changed a lot over the years. My dad is very frustrated sometimes when he hears when he meets people who don't speak English or just speak Chinese, for example, and he gets very upset about this because he's of a generation that understands that Singapore was built on the idea that we've got our different subcultures, all these different people who speak their own languages in their own communities with their own families, but when we come together as Singaporean, we all speak English as a common language. And he still feels that very, very strongly, and so he gets quite upset when people can't speak English, and there's an assumption made that he should be able to speak Chinese. Now, I receive this a lot. I mean, look at me. You would think that I might speak Chinese. Turns out my Chinese is terrible. I only can say like 12 words, and 10 of them are numbers, and so it's quite tricky when the aunties at the hawker centre, for example, or at the markets will start speaking to me, and sometimes I've even been scolded for not knowing my mother tongue, and I try to kind of justify it by saying, I speak French and I speak Italian, because I grew up in the West, and I almost feel like I'm justifying the fact that I'm not dumb because I can't speak Chinese. Yet there is this thing going on, and so to consider that perspective that my dad has, and maybe not just that my dad has, that Singapore has had over the years. We have got people here who are not English speakers in terms of their first language. We've got Tamil, we've got Malay, we've got Mandarin Chinese, we've got dialects in there. I wonder whether the Singlish that now has appeared is simplified and lacks some of the simple pleases and thank yous that this colleague of mine was frustrated that she didn't hear, but because we stick to the basics of what we know. For example, I went to a new hawker centre recently. If you haven't checked it out, you can check out our other channel, which is called Wanderlust, and we explore all sorts of different places around Singapore and across the region actually. But the other day we went to a hawker centre, and when I went to order some food, the person behind the counter said, "What do you want?" There was no, "Hi sir, good afternoon, what can I get for you today?" Which is, I guess, something that I would typically expect when I was in the UK. But instead I get a, "What do you want?" And it kind of seems abrupt, but I think it's actually less abrupt and more to the point. For people who don't speak English as their main language, having something really, really direct, "What do you want?" is a lot more straightforward. And like I think of places right now like the Chai Fun place, the place that we lovingly call the Point place, where you get to go to the hawk center or to the coffee shop, and you get to choose what you want to eat out of a huge array of different dishes, and we can just point that one, I want this, I want that. And it's less of that please may I have. Maybe there's just too many words in there that can risk confusing people. I don't know. I just wonder, is that why we are a lot more direct and seemingly rude, when actually I truly believe that our heart and our intention is a polite one and a kind one? Working in an international school, I encounter students from all around the world, and sometimes simplifying English rather than having all of the extra fluff around it is quite tricky. I have noticed that some students make sounds instead of ask questions. Sounds that in the UK when I was teaching there would have just been rude. For example, if I'm not very clear with something I'm saying, a student might go, huh? Or what? Instead of pardon, which is a very, very English word that would come across as very polite, but here it just seems maybe slightly unnecessary. And I just wonder whether we could, I'm saying, I don't want to incriminate my colleague. She had a really, really good point, and her experiences are incredibly valid. However, for me, I wonder whether we could be more gracious in terms of the language that we hear and the politeness. I don't know whether maybe I've just become rude and I understand what I expect, and maybe I dish that out too. I don't know. I'm thinking about situations in like taxis. I know the influencers who've talked about the rudeness of Singapore have hopped into a taxi and complained about the uncles who might be rude, but I don't believe that's necessarily the case. I think perhaps they are just direct. Where are you going? Put your seatbelt on. Don't forget your stuff. I don't know. I'm just thinking aloud. I'm really interested in your thoughts. I would love for you to be able to share with me. I'm looking forward to hearing it. To be honest, I'm thrilled that I'm able to get some content out because I've missed it. It's a huge hobby of mine and I just haven't had time for it. I've got a few more videos that I'm thinking about pulling out real soon, and looking at being a little bit more creative with the way that I film as well, and I'm hoping that you're going to enjoy it, that you'll join me on the journey. Please hit subscribe, it helps me a lot. I'm really close to 1,000 subscribers on this channel. I'd love to be able to get to that milestone. I think that would be really cool, and I'd appreciate it if you would help me get there. Like I said, please comment below. I'd love to engage with you in these conversations, particularly about Singapore culture and current affairs. They mean a lot to me on my own journey of discovering my country of birth and what it means for me to be from this beautiful nation, this nation that I love very, very dearly. So thanks very much. We'll catch you next time, and hopefully it'll be really soon. Bye bye.